The following podcast is part of the MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network.
This episode is brought to you by Heyday. Feeling stressed? Take a moment for yourself with Heyday. Stroll through rows of golden wheat, tend to cute barnyard animals, and discover the joys of a digital farm retreat. You don't have to hop in a car or catch a plane. Escape to the farm at the tap of a finger. With Heyday, you're not just tending to a farm, you're tending to yourself. Heyday. Search Heyday, that's Hay space DAY, in your favorite app store. Heyday is a free-to-play mobile game and offers optional in-app purchases and random rewards.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Wholeness means to me being in a state of joy.
Wholeness means feeling complete, owning my authentic gifts.
Wholeness is really connected. Everything is connected to everything.
Wholeness is where we have access to all parts of ourselves.
Welcome back to part 2 of our deep dive into the book Braving the Wilderness by Brené Brown. In part 1, we unpacked the core idea of what it truly means to belong to yourself first, and how real belonging often requires the courage to stand alone and to really be authentic. We explore Brené's definition of true belonging and some of our own personal stories, and the myth that fitting in is the same as belonging. Now in part 2, we're going further into the wilderness and learning the meaning of braving. If you loved part 1, you won't want to miss this continuation. And if you're new here, go back and give the first part a listen to catch up on the powerful ideas that set the stage. Let's brave the wilderness together.
I also loved in the book too how, the word wilderness, I feel like that was a really good word, because when we haven't figured this all out, that is what, that is the wilderness, and that's important too. Do you know what I mean? And she talks about the wilderness symbolizes a place of solitude, vulnerability, and authenticity. And I would add uncertainty at times. I would add maybe discomfort, being in that place where it just feels, where it's like vast, and it's just like, and sometimes we go into this wilderness, and I feel like in this book, it was like, and we're supposed to, you know what I mean? We're supposed to, in like almost every, origin story of humanity, but there is a going to the wilderness, and instead of thinking, and there's this idea that you're like cast out into the wilderness, but what if going into the wilderness is really like, hey, you're going to go into a wilderness in your life. That is the plan. That is life here, right? I mean, because it is. Okay. It is. We all need to go into that wilderness, and
it's a point. It's a part of your development.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Because if you don't have any opposition, like if you don't use weights to build your muscle, you have no muscle. Like if you have no opposition, there is no growth. And so, so the wilderness, I think it is just, it's being out in the middle of nowhere all by yourself. I think she's definitely talking about that, but I also think it's this place of not being sure, of like these times in our lives where we don't have the answer yet, where we're just kind of in limbo for a little bit, as far as from the stressor to the resolve. In between that time is a sort of wilderness, and we do it over and over again, over and over again.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting idea, because I think about the wilderness, and when you hear about it, like, I guess, scripture, you're leaving everything, right? And you're taking the bare necessities and you're moving forward. And that is uncomfortable. Right. Nobody wants to suffer. Like, it feels like suffering. But gosh, if it's a place where you're going to grow and evolve, maybe we can look at it differently.
Right. Right. Because this is what we have to understand. The word, if I spell out the word wilderness, it's just a W, it's just an I, it's just an L, you know what I mean? And so on and so on. It's benign. But our So we have to know that how we feel about those times in our lives are our programming.
Okay.
Because we had to be taught this is scary. Like this is, we're like, oh, things aren't going well. That's bad. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I mean, I think as little kids, yes, they have periods where you're upset. And that's the thing too, is we also think that anytime we have a negative, quote, negative like emotion, we're in the wilderness. And every time we have a good emotion, we're, in the promised land.
In paradise. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not true. That again is programming. Like it's all the way through our life is, and so it brings me back to like you talked about earlier. I was going to bring it up as like, um, you know, I remember getting to the point in my healing where I realized that what I was actually looking for was a little more close to I don't want to say nothingness, but it was like I was swinging from one strong negative emotion basically to one's, or like I would say preferred, one strong non-preferred emotion to
Okay.
another, and so feeling like I was supposed to be in these strong preferred emotions, or else it didn't count. But like, wow, that left so much of the, spectrum to be
Right.
wilderness, right? To be
Hmm.
wilderness. But like, so sometimes when I'm working on the pod, no, not the podcast. Sometimes when I'm working on the website and there's a problem to be solved, and I'm like, how do I get this done? And my husband does the same thing. He's a programmer too. So it's like, oh, you're like pacing, like, okay, and you try this and you try that to try and figure it out. And it's such hard work, but oh my gosh, when you
Yeah.
figure it out, it's like, look what I did. I have to have him come in. I'm like, look what I did. I did this, 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 and this,
Wow.
because it's like, and I don't think if I had that difficult time that it would be as the result wouldn't be as like satisfying, right?
Hmm.
And at the same time, and there are times where if you're having a hard time, I would never say to you, yeah, but this is what you have to do so that you can have a happy time. When you're in the wilderness, let people be in the wilderness and join them in their wilderness rather than tell them all about the promised land, right? Like I think we do that all
Yeah.
the time. We're like, yeah, but then you can just do this, or yeah, this will be so good. And it's like, but sometimes, but it's so that comes from a judgment of, okay, you're in these feelings. They're not good. Like
Yeah.
nobody says that, but that's what we receive. And so I find if I can do for myself and for others when they're in the wilderness, let's just go sit in the wilderness for a minute and tell me what it feels like, and I will feel with you.
Yeah.
And then I feel like we move towards the resolve much quicker. So it's a
You're
both
not more
and.
naturally.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
both and. Like I would say, yeah, we have to have the difficult times, but no, I would never say, so back up, you know what I mean?
Pull yourself
Or
up by your bootstraps. Like
right.
there is space, like you said, there is space to sit in the wilderness with someone. Why do we want to fix things so badly? Because it's we notice it and recognize it, and it makes us feel like we're in the wilderness too. But
I wonder. Yeah, probably.
but
Probably.
then we need to make that okay.
Right.
Or maybe we need to make that the normal. Maybe not make it okay, but just say like, yeah, this sucks.
Well, let me tell you this, like, ask you this, as you were raising your kids and your kids were crying, wasn't it make it stop?
Yes, I still
Like,
feel that way when I hear kids crying in the store. I'm like, I'm so uncomfortable. Please
right,
stop.
make it stop. I mean, what does that tell the child? Like, even if it's like, I mean, I'm not saying I'm any good at this, but like, it's like if they're hungry and they're crying to get their needs met, like that crying, it's a good thing. It's a good
Hmm.
communicator. But we are so programmed. It's like a baby's crying, stop it. Well, that's the way that's what we learned. Someone's upset, stop it.
True.
Like that, there's
Yep.
no other way we'd walk out of that than being like, here's a problem, fix it, make it go away. So I try at least a little bit with my grandbaby now that I get a second chance to pick him up and when he's crying and say like, yeah, that's hard, isn't it? And try to validate
Cute.
that
How
sad
neat. That feels
feeling.
so good.
Yeah,
Can I just record you saying that to me when I'm feeling a sad
I
emotion?
know, right?
That's hard,
Right.
Shalene. Yes, I
I
know.
know it's hard. Yeah, that is hard. Yeah, let's get you some. Yeah, you're hungry, aren't you? Let's get some food.
Hmm.
Because I think I think I'm doing some reparenting for myself. I was, like I say, I was the youngest of seven. There was a lot going on. There was a lot going
Mhm.
on. It was a lot easier if, as children, we learn that very quickly to to do what needs to get done to get, to be accepted, to be accepted. And we
Be
know really
okay.
quick, yeah,
Hmm.
what to do to not be acceptable. And I think it's just like you said earlier, we just have, nobody teaches it. Nobody teaches it
No.
how to do that. So my hope is that
Yeah.
we can teach ourselves and then we can pass that on to our kids, and then our kids can pass it on to their kids, and maybe like by third generation, like that's a whole new way of showing up in the world. We'll see.
Right.
We'll see. But
Yeah.
meanwhile, we heal ourselves. We heal ourselves.
The ripples like you were talking about.
The
Yeah.
ripples. One of the other good quotes in the book was, "Stop walking through the world looking for confirmation that you don't belong. You will always find it because you are looking for it. But if you look for belonging, you'll find it everywhere." And that gives
That's
me a lot
such
of
a
hope.
mind change. It gives me hope too. And I kept thinking, I need to share this with my youngest. Because
Hmm.
like I said before, oh, so and so hates me. Okay. She's looking for how she doesn't belong, and she is finding it
Right.
everywhere.
We do it. We are good at that. We are so
And
good
I'm
at
good
that.
at it too. I sort
Hmm.
myself
Yeah, totally.
constantly,
Yep.
finding those ways I don't belong. But
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I remember, like, this is so being vulnerable and imperfect, but I remember I have this picture of myself walking into the grocery store. It's so dumb now when I think about it. I'm like, that was so dumb. But I was like adding up the cost of everything I was wearing as
hmm,
if it was expensive or something, that it meant something.
then you are
Like,
valuable.
yes.
Hmm.
And I just remember thinking, but I remember that being like, um, like almost this feeling of like, okay, it's like that gave me permission to be enough or something.
Yeah.
And now I look back, I maybe I need to do some work where I walk back to that, parking lot and say, you know, first of all, I'd ask myself, what are you feeling?
Hmm.
Because and really get clear on what you're feeling, because you're adding up your things. So what's going on? And at the bottom of that is, I'm not confident, or I'm not secure, right? I'm not secure. And then I'd say, oh, what does that feel like to feel secure? What do you want that to feel like?
Hmm.
And really, really slow that quick thought down as much as possible. And I feel like just by slowing it down, it's like, okay, that's what's going on. And then it kind of shifts because we've let that feeling exist. As soon as that feeling came up, I just started counting. I started adding up numbers, right? I never let
Hmm.
that part of myself actually exist. I was just make it go away because here,
Oh
like,
gosh.
and I think we do that all the time. I think we do that so much, which is why I've just loved doing parts work, because I go back to those moments and say, what was really going on there? And it
Hmm.
doesn't matter if it was outside. It doesn't, like, I really don't think I had like a difficult conversation that day or anything like that. I just was still in the programming of what I looked like and who I was and what I did defined me. I was just
Yeah.
following the rules, but it was like, if I could poke in that and just say, hey, that rule doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Like, are you adding up what other people are wearing? That's another thing I would look for.
Yeah.
Am I like looking at somebody and adding their stuff up? No, I'm not even worried about that. So if
Yeah.
that's true, chances are that's how other people are reacting toward me. They've got their own stuff. They've
Yes.
got their own stuff going on. They're adding up their own clothes. I'm not, you know what I mean? So like, what if we all just say, let's not add up our clothes anymore, which I'm sure
Yeah.
not everybody does.
No, but I think we're adding up our
Something.
gifts, our
Yeah.
talents sometimes, or like we're adding up something to make
Yeah.
ourselves feel worthy instead of just like being,
Hmm.
being
Right. Right.
just like, I am here,
Yep. And I'm
warts and all,
connected. Yeah.
I'm
And
connected.
that in that warts and imperfection is what makes me the most valuable, because I
Yeah.
am different. Like,
Right.
I think I say this a lot, is it's like your differences make you, it's like if we, there's like a precious painting because it's only one, it's like there's not very many of them. Well, you and how you think and how you look and how you act and how you think are that's the most rare commodity in the entire universe. Like
Mm,
that's really valuable. Like you can't get
yeah.
there's another one, there's not anyone like it. So if we can practice that feeling of owning that pricelessness, I think that those are things that we can connect to when we're in the wilderness. We're always going to be in the wilderness, but then we have some like, we've tucked away a little bread and water maybe to make it through those difficult times. I don't know, but she talks about this idea of strong back, soft front, wild heart. So, and I wanted to just say her definition of wild heart, I really liked. A wild heart is the opposite of being a people pleaser. It's not about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about the courage to stand alone, to live from the inside out, to make choices that honor your truth, and to have the strength to walk through the world as your true self. So, strong back, what does that mean? What did you feel like that meant to you, that strong back?
Yeah. I've actually been pondering that because
Yeah.
trying to figure out like could I create some sort of metaphor, to help because I'm a metaphor person and I like to create ideas. And I really haven't come up with anything besides saying like when you have a soft front, when you're not don't have the armor there, like you're open
Mm-hmm.
to the soft belly rub and you're open to that gut punch.
Yeah.
And the strong back means that you're going to be able to withhold both of those. You're going to be able to stand up and be able to withhold both.
I love
And
that.
that's scary
Right.
because I even normally in the world, I will cross my arms a lot. Like I'm protecting.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that of myself of like I think there's a little bit of stuff going on, Chalene,
Mm-hmm.
when you're uncomfortable just being open right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's more energetic, than necessarily being waiting for a physical
Right.
attack.
Right.
But I think it's a great idea to just recognize that, yeah, there are going to be things that are going to come in and there's going to be awesome things and there's going to be hard things, but I can stand up strong and withstand that. Like I will
Mm-hmm.
have bruises,
Mm-hmm.
but it won't take me out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you bring up the point that like our focus is on the difficult stuff. It's not like, hey, if I'm open, there's a chance to get all these lovins. You know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
that difficult stuff can wipe out 10 lovins, like
It's so
10.
true.
And I feel like that's why we do healing work because it's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And little by little, that open heart, that soft front, is comfortable because it knows the back is strong. And the back is strong because it knows the heart's gonna, it becomes like they work in tandem together. And then that wild heart, um, having to, just being able to be true to yourself, you know, and
Yeah.
and I think that's valuable.
I think that's where like the repair can come from too, is like I was thinking about my heart earlier today, and it feels like just kind of a charred little piece of
Oh.
thing when I was meditating it earlier today, and I was like, what is it going to take to fix it? And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's that true essence of what it is, repairing it from the inside out, of like coming and saying like the people pleasing, it'll kill you. It'll kill who you are because then you won't recognize yourself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so really finding that true, authentic, wild heart, it's almost like being grafted, right? We have our natural heart, we have the wild part, but we need to like just accept that inner strength, that inner part, that wild,
Mm-hmm.
crazy, weird, whatever
Right.
words you want to put on it, that makes you so unique is
Mm-hmm.
what's going to repair that heart.
True. It's true. It's true. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about this quote. The quote in the book was, I am the wilderness. What do you think that means?
I was going to ask you that question
Well, let's talk about it
because when
together.
she's like, she talks about stuff like that. And I'm like, you have had to have thought about this for a long time
Yeah.
because the book's only 4 hours long. It took me a long time to read it because there were
Yeah.
times where I had to stop and really think, like, what is she saying in this
Right.
moment?
Right.
So yeah, I would love to hear what you have to say. I think I am the wilderness, meaning I am comfortable being everywhere. Because if you can be comfortable in the wilderness, you can be comfortable in the comfort places. But other than that, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Well, I haven't thought about this too much, so this is just rambling off my head. But two things come to mind quickly is I think that it goes into this, deep down, like when it goes into this wholeness, like we really need to really accept that our wholeness is all of who we are, all of the parts of us,
Mm-hmm.
including including those difficult parts. And so I feel like that's kind of what it's saying. I am the wilderness. But also, I remember, there's, if you go back to the episode with Jeff Olson, he talks a little bit about it. But so I learned from him. He says, I remember um, really, really paying attention to that Bible verse that says, "I am that I am,"
Mm.
and for him, I am, so I am that I am. And whatever's in the middle of that, that means anything. So if I'm to my person that I don't like, I am so and so, I am. That is the
Hmm.
literal connection of who we are. So the words I am are really powerful because it's by itself, when we get to our most exalted states, when we feel the best about ourselves, we don't need to put anything beyond that. It's just I am. I am. That's it. We don't need to say I am this, I am that, I have this, I have that. I am is the ultimate definition of who I want to be. Just those two
Hmm.
words. I am, period, sentence. So when I saw this, I mean, that comes up. I am the wilderness. I think, so if I think about this place of being, comfortable with the I am version of myself, then I can put anything behind that and be okay with it, including this most thing that I think I'm supposed to not like, this thing that's
Yeah. Yeah.
behind that's like, no, I'm not supposed to like that. But it's like, I mean, and again, it's a practice and meaning some days it's not going to work. Some days, forget it. Like, no way. But the goal is to get to where I can be anything, and because it's all part of me. It's all part of who I am anyway, but it's really easy to block some things out and be like, I am this, I am that number that I added up on my outfit. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
like, okay, but what does that mean? It's like, I am actually all of those things. And that's where it's the ultimate healing. Like we think like, but halfway in between that sometimes is like being comfortable with ourselves because we have all these things or because we can do all these things. But the exalted version of that is just being, I am this, and then and that's it, and whatever comes next,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, I accept it. I accept it. I am,
Yeah.
even if I am nervous, I am scared, I am sad. Okay, it all belongs. Like it all
Yeah.
belongs here.
So that's true wholeness then. Being in the wilderness, I am the wilderness is
Right? I think
I am
so.
whole too.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Um, and also again, I'm going to bring up the idea that, um, I don't mean that as like prescriptive, because if we have any kind of trauma, that needs to be healed first. So I made a little. I'm going to put a reel this month where I recorded myself after I got out of the dentist because
Oh,
I had gone to the dentist. I had just a feeling that was kind of big, and they decided it was time to put a crown on it. So we had this big tooth, the very last back tooth, and
hmm.
we had to grind it down to, like a nub to be able to put the things on. So there was so much drilling,
Oh
and
gosh.
and it was just, I was trying to use all of my tools to like be in the moment, like allow this pain, like I'm trying to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so hard because it was so uncomfortable. And I even in the middle of it, I'm like, the pain level isn't the thing that's difficult. It was just so, it was like, I couldn't believe how emotional it was. I couldn't believe how physical it was, but like
Wow.
irritating. I couldn't believe how frustrating it was. I couldn't believe how thoughts of like, I'm bad show up. It was like just this like
Hmm.
blender of all these things. It was so uncomfortable. And I thought to so I came out and I recorded something because I said, you know, um, that for me in that moment, I was in the wilderness, right? I was in the
Mm.
wilderness, and I'm telling you, I was using all my tricks, and it was a difficult time. It was so uncomfortable. And like I say, had so many emotions and feelings and thoughts in it. And so one of the things we can do is have compassion for other people while they're in their wilderness, because what happens is um, when, at that time, like if I was feeling those feelings inside, which can happen, that's what happens when we're trauma. Like we can't process, like it's all just huge, right? Everything's just huge. And so if somebody had given me, like in the middle of that, let's say it was possible that somebody was like, hey, can you like go ahead and like make dinner while you're doing this? I'd be like, no, like, no. Or if I was driving and somebody cut me off, you would bet I'd be like, I'm not in my heart space. I am in this wilderness. And so I just thought to myself, what if, I could look at someone else having a hard time, like we talked about earlier, and recognizing they must be really thirsty in the wilderness. You know what I mean? They must have to really kind of have that in right there that I could pull from to say, oh, that person is in their wilderness, because I was so, I mean, I knew all the tools, I had everything. I couldn't make it okay in that moment. I could not make it pleasurable or even tolerable. I couldn't. And that is the epitome of what sometimes a lot of people are walking around with, that just below the surface, so that anything that comes out pops it clear up. I think Brené actually talked about it in another book. She calls it hitting the ceiling. It's like, so, you're already elevated. So even the smallest thing, which might just bump people barely up, you're there, people with trauma are up here. So you've hijacked yourself to the ceiling. Like you've jumped as if this huge thing. And I think there's a lot of that going on too. And then we re-traumatize ourselves because you're like honking and honking back and, and we're just in this whole thing. And no one's saying, hey, are you okay? And maybe that's not possible outside, but we got to do that inside. Like, hey, I'm not okay right now. I am not okay. And reach out if we need to, like our card talked about, there are people that are willing to help you, and maybe it's not, and a lot of times it's just, hey, I'm just feeling this feeling. Will you just like, can I just tell you I'm feeling it?
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Building a portfolio with Fidelity Basket Portfolios is kind of like making a sandwich. It's as simple as picking your stocks and ETFs, sort of like your meats and other toppings, and managing it as one big, juicy investment. Now that's pretty good. Learn more at fidelity.com/baskets. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. Member NYSE SIPC.
Vitamin Water was born in New York because New Yorkers wanted more flavor to pair with all the amazing food in the city. You can have the best meal in the world here, if you can get a reservation. Vitamin Water is so New York, its 3 favorite cheeses are chopped cheese, bacon, egg, and cheese, and a slice of cheese pizza. We know where to get the best sushi in the city, and best nachos, and best bagels, and best... You get it. And you can find food trucks better than 5-star restaurants. Drink Vitamin Water. It's from New York.
I think if I was in the dentist and I would have said, like if my husband was there and I was like, this hurts really bad, like, I don't like this, I think it would have helped actually.
I think so.
That's the connection. That's the beauty of connection that we can be for each other. It alleviates suffering, just the connection. We're just wired that way.
We need to just have like random grannies at the dentist's office, at the hospitals, walking around and just saying, are you okay? Just there's just something comforting about somebody that's been through it too, saying that. But like, you're right. I don't know how to fix it in that moment. I think about like being yelled at, for example, at a store or something like that.
Right.
And it's so easy just to take it, right? When it comes to you, instead of just saying like, wow, you must be going through something. I'm really sorry, or I don't even know what the right words are.
Right.
But acknowledging that it's theirs and not yours, but we do bump against each other. We do. And just also telling yourself of like, guess what? You're okay too. In that instance of like, Ooh,
Yeah.
that's tricky.
Well, she gave us some things to look at, which was her, it's the braving part. So braving stands for
Okay.
some things. So this is how we do it. This is how we can brave through the wilderness, whether it's someone
Okay.
else's wilderness or our own wilderness. So number one, B is boundaries, respecting our own boundaries and those of others. So, and again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but a lot of times we think of boundary as like, this is my line in the sand, don't cross it. Like this is, and sometimes it's hard because people will use boundaries to say like, I need you to act this way for me to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's appropriate and sometimes it's not, like that one's a tricky one. But if we can look at it more like our capacity or like, here's where I end, and here's where you begin, meaning, if that person's having that feeling, that does not cross over. There's a boundary there that it does not cross over into my experience because that boundary is in place. So like when somebody yells at me, that I have that boundary that's there long before I showed up at that store that says, those are yours and this is mine. And so I might have a reaction to what they're going through, inside my body and say like, oh, like, what the heck? But I feel it inside of me as my feelings, not as they're making me feel this way. Do you know what I mean? They're like, it's like, ooh, I'm upset, and like, and sometimes it's like, yeah, I need to defend myself. Like, it doesn't mean that you just never talk back or whatever, but it's having a, like we talked about, the ability to respond is responsibility. It's like, I create an ability to respond with the correct, to be able to respond correctly, where it's like, hey, I'm feeling a lot of upset here, what's going on? Or like, I can see you're upset, some kind of a separation where it becomes, that boundary gets to stay in place. And women especially are taught to not have boundaries, and part of it's not negligent because we need to with our children when they're little, especially, there is no boundary there. Their nervous system is our nervous system, our nervous system is their nervous system for a long time. So we have to kind of practice that. It's not maybe our natural thing, but that's really important.
I like that. And I guess to me, I tend to default to not saying anything, to just like taking it. But I liked that you said you can respond. And I think that that's maybe the key, maybe for me personally. Maybe other people will feel that way too, of like figuring out a way to say that there was a boundary there, to say like, I see that you're going through something. I apologize for what I did to make you sad or whatever, but also like, that wasn't my intent and nothing you can do can make that my intent. Or I don't even know what I could say in that moment, but something to like still try to hold on to that empathy. I remember there was a part in there where she was trying to respond to someone who was attacking her. And she said, I mustered up all my empathy I possibly could to respond. So maybe that's just where you start of like, okay, I'm going to try and have empathy. I'm not going to try to be another attacker in this situation.
Right. Well,
I tell you, oh, that's hard.
It's hard. But I would say too, I would actually add one more thing in there, because if you're not used to being authentic or imperfect, I would rather have you authentically yell and imperfectly do it.
You would?
Yeah. Because because that is like jumping off the cliff. And if you jump off the cliff and you live, then the next time you're going to be like, oh, I can jump off the cliff. It's that first time, you know what I mean? Like, it's that first time. I would rather have you yell back imperfectly than take in the argument and hold back that, because if you're having a feeling, that is authentic, right? So don't say, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. It is. It's already there.
Yeah.
We could say, I mean, it's different to say, oh, I'm feeling that way. What do I need? Or what is it calling for me to do? That's more of a healthy way of doing it. But if you have to if you have to do it wrong a few times, I would rather have that than, because then you'll be able to get to your empathy. Some people, it might not be everybody, but some people you have to do it imperfectly first.
Okay.
Because we so manage ourselves so much, we manage ourselves so much.
People pleaser?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for coaching me through that. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So like, and it would be an interesting experiment to see if there was some freedom there or if there was some regret, We don't know until we try it, right? We don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Okay.
braving boundaries. Okay, number R, braving is reliability, consistently doing what you'll say you'll do.
Hmm.
And I think that's helpful because, I think a lot of our reactions, like we talked about earlier, are, hey, that happened to you. Like that didn't happen to me. Like we're actually in this conversation. This conversation sometimes in difficulties is very often created from past things, right?
Yeah.
So from past
Yeah.
things. So if we can begin to be consistent and reliable, then maybe going forward we have less of those things that we need to resolve, right? Because it's difficult when we're not consistent, right? It causes some issues within ourselves and within our relationships. So I thought
True.
that was an interesting one.
Yeah.
The A is accountability, owning your mistakes, apologizing, and making amends. Now that goes to the other one. Let's say you do it imperfectly, you yell imperfectly, and you're upset imperfectly, but it's authentic. And then you're like, look, that might have come out a little strong. Then you can go through and do some repair. But there's a lot that goes into holding back, So if you're not prepared to be able to do it right, then do it bad. Do it bad and then say, okay, that didn't work.
Yeah.
Sorry
Make
about
amends.
that. Yeah, make amends. Okay, V is vault, keeping confidences, not sharing information or experiences that aren't yours to share. And do you know what's interesting is I honestly, this one's hard for me. Which sounds so weird, but it's like I think, especially being the youngest and having my siblings all older, I was hearing their like stories of this was happening, this is happening, and it was like happening for all of us. Like it was like we're in it together kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I realized that some people don't act that way. Like I know some people that I know this man had he had like appendicitis and like it burst, like it was a whole thing, and I was like, how are you doing? And it was like, fine. You could tell he did not want that to be talked about, which I was just like, was so weird for me because I'd be like, hey, so and so had their appendix out. What should we take him something? You know what I mean? Like it wasn't, I didn't feel like it. So this one's a little like, sometimes I struggle with this one just because it's not that I'm wanting to gossip about people. It's just like, hey, we're all shared. Like, let's, like, I don't know, sometimes what's private for some people, I just don't have that. Like, I'm like a little bit of an open book, maybe to a fault.
I don't know. I think that's authenticity and vulnerability.
Mm.
I guess there on the shadow side of that, when you are authentic, I think you have less things you need to keep in that vault.
True.
And so, I guess the challenge also is to say like, why does this need to be? Granted, there are things that maybe are secret for a reason.
Right.
That things aren't meant to be known.
Right.
But if you're constantly feeling like I have a sibling who's there, she's always like, oh, we can't talk about that. Like, there's all these things like we already know, so for example, just to give an example, because I hate it when people are vague, which goes to the vault. That's a tricky one for me.
Right.
But it's like,
I'm glad it is for you because I feel guilty.
Yeah. Their brother-in-law was gay and they're like, oh, well, we can't talk about it. I'm like, we already know. Why can't we talk about it?
Right.
Like that just makes it feel like it's shameful.
Right.
So I think that, we have to kind of look at both sides of that. If we're being asked to keep this a secret, like honor that. But also saying like, why do you need to?
Right. Are you assuming that we're only going to talk negatively about it? No, I don't, that doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily what I would do. But yeah, so I'm glad to hear that from you because I was a little nervous. I'm like, when we're going through these, I'm like, that one's kind of tricky for me because I don't like having secrets, like I don't like secrets, but I get about confidences. I get it. I get that there's certain things you're not going to say, hey, listen what I heard over here. I'm not going to tell you about, listen to what my client told me, like that would not be right. Okay. In braving, integrity is choosing courage over comfort, practicing your values rather than simply professing them. And it wasn't tell this book that she says that a lot, choosing courage over comfort. So I thought that was interesting. Like, what if we could get comfortable with discomfort? What if that was just so used to us, that wasn't uncomfortable, that we could be that courage, we can use that courage enough time that we live in that courageous place. I don't know.
I think it would definitely shift what your comfort is.
I think, right?
That's able to be shifted.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, the N is non-judgment, being able to ask for what you need and talk about how you feel without judgment. I loved how there was
talking about yourself.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's
That's
both
not for
sides.
Others.
Right. Being able to ask for what you want and need and talk about how you feel without judgment. Yeah, it's not necessarily judging other people, because again, back to that quote. I'm going to read it again. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. So if we judge ourselves, we're going to judge other people. It's not about stopping judging other people. It's about stopping judging ourselves. When we stop judging ourselves, there isn't a need to judge the other person. But we think we do it backwards. We get down on ourselves for being judgmental, but it's like, that is a key. You don't do one without the other.
Oh, my mom used to teach me that. I was like, if something's really bothering you and someone else, like, hold up a mirror for a minute and just see.
Yeah.
And typically there is some truth.
Right.
Although I don't want to admit it, but there is.
Right. Right. But that's why you can look at it as like a part of you, and a part of you that's needing something. It wouldn't do it if it didn't need something. It's its way of communicating, right? So what do you need? And like, even if it's like, I need $1 million, like that might come out. I need $1 million. I mean, even then, having that interaction with yourself, you're going to be like, okay, like and then just being like, okay. And allowing that to be true. It doesn't mean you have to go out and make $1 million. You're just acknowledging that part's needs. Mm-hmm. That's it. It's like, okay, that's it. That's it.
I like that.
We can do that with our kids too. I want that. You do? Oh, that's awesome. I remember learning that, like, this lady, I think I've talked about it before, but she had a young kid and she'd like, do you want that for your birthday? That would be awesome. Let's get that for your birthday. Awesome. And when the birthday came around, he didn't have the 50 things on the list. Like, you said I could get this, you know what I mean? Because it was just the validation. It was like, that looks so awesome. I love that, rather than, no, you can't get a toy today, whatever. Mm-hmm. But the last one is G, generosity, extending the most generous interpretation possible to the intentions, words, and actions of others. And like we say, I think if you go through that non-judgment, that generosity is the result. That's just almost like natural.
Assuming the best in others. And boy, that's a tricky one for me. I think probably my daughter may have learned some of her feelings from her mom, but it feels better to go through the world assuming the good things than the bad things.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Feels better.
Right. Anyway, but it was a great book. I highly recommend it. And
it's short too. Yeah.
Short.
You can learn a lot in a short amount of time.
When most people are asked what they want, they will answer, I want to be happy. But happy takes practice. And that's what the Wholeness Library is all about. So check it out free at thewholenessnetwork.com.